Meeting order. And Doug, if you can just note the roll, I think that's fine.
Yes.
And the appearance section is for anybody that's here to appear about an item that's not on the agenda, meaning if you have an item that's on the agenda and that's what you're here to speak on, don't worry about it. We're gonna do both public hearing and discussion and consideration. So if you're here for one of those pieces, sit tight. We'll get you in order. If you're here to speak on any other issues, that's when we need you to fill out a form. But seeing everybody, it seems like they're on an agenda item.
And are we allowed to leave after?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we should require you to stay, just so you can see like the process, but no, like you can leave
Okay.
before or after, it don't matter.
No.
Like whenever you want, yeah, absolutely. You're not forced to stay for any
Okay.
amount of time. And then do we have anybody online that is here to appear on an item that is not on the agenda? The only one that is a possibility is a phone number which looks like 847-393-3058 or 3085.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this is Jim Lindholm. I'm having audio issues.
Okay, Jim, is that phone number also you?
Yes, the phone number is me, and I'll try to get off the Zoom.
Oh, okay, either way, so it's good to know. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't someone waiting there to appear, so. Perfect, we'll get you in here in just a short minute, so if you can hold tight, we'll be back to you, and then Olson.
Jeremy's with us.
Yes, with.
Okay, perfect, all right. So seeing nobody in the waiting room and no one here for appearances, we can close that section. Item 4 is approval of the minutes from the March 21st meeting. The motion,
I'll move to approve.
all right,
I'll second.
and then any corrections to the minutes? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, minutes have been approved, and then we can move on to item 5. The first item is well, actually, I'll pause. We have a minor agenda change for items 9 and 10.
Yes, thank you. So items 9 and 10, specifically relating to 1409 Baskerville Avenue. These were noticed that this would be coming through with regards to a fence in the street yard. I did have further discussion with Mr. Funny about this, and it was determined that a special exception from the city council was going to be the best option for this, specifically because the applicant was not appealing the decision of the building inspector as had been noticed here, but rather was seeking a variance from dimensional as well as locational standards. The fence was going to be taller, located closer to the street than the ordinance would allow. So that was kind of the reason for this in the first place. So because of the fact that this is in the building section and not in the zoning, it was determined that that was the reason for it to go to council as being the better path forward here. So the burden and sort of the review process will be a little bit different as well. With it going to city council, that won't be sort of the standards that would be for the variance. It's a lot more open discussion sort of as it relates to that. But because that's part of 175, the fences are regulated by that standard on 480 of the zoning. That's why it was determined that. So I was able to connect with the applicant, let them know. They obviously chose not to attend tonight, and I said I would share this. And the application fee will be refunded. The cost will be considered at the city council. So I'm expecting the first meeting in August when that comes through.
And I assume for council's sake, Bill will be there to
Yes.
shepherd that. All right, good. 'Cause, we don't get many of those, sorry.
Yeah. You want me to?
All right, so now we can round back up to item 5, which is a public hearing, and this is by James Lindhorn and Deborah Eathington. This is 1100 Nishishin Trail, and they are requesting a variance from the Monona Municipal Code of Ordinance, section 480-24B4E, the shore yard setbacks, for the purposes of building a 2-story addition to the existing property and constructing a raised deck. This is case number Z003-2024. And,
Hi.
all right,
You want me to?
yep, absolutely. If you can walk us through
Sure.
during the public hearing section, I think you've been here before.
I have not, but.
Okay, during the public hearing section, it's an opportunity for you to share what is it that you're wanting to do?
Right,
If there are some questions that we have, kind of just in general, we might ask those during this time. If there's anybody else that is wanting to speak about the project, either for or against it, or for informational purposes, they would do that during the public hearing section.
sure.
Ultimately, we will end up closing that section. And then we would open up item 6, which is the consideration of action. And that's when the committee will do the discussion regarding, does it meet these different elements? And if so, what do we do about it?
Okay.
So this is your opportunity to share with us what it is that you're hoping.
Sure, okay. So my name is Lori Browson and I am representing Jim and Deborah who own the property. We're contractors and we have come in sort of after the fact. They have actually come through the zoning board of appeals and received a variance on their property for the one-story addition and the raising of the deck. But there were some items that were brought to our attention when we were brought onto the project. And so we felt like we need to kind of have this all addressed at the same time. We're certainly not looking to have the previous variance removed. But we're hoping to kind of add on to it if that's possible. So the long and short of it is that the house was built on a double lot before these shoreland ordinances were in effect. And so the original portion of the house couldn't even be built now because it's within 75 feet of the lagoon side. It's fortunately far enough back, the original house, from the Monona side that isn't a factor. But then there's been various additions onto the home, and those are the parts that are affected towards the Monona side. The one-story addition that was approved doesn't meet the 75 feet, but that's where they received their variance. And the main thing about this house is because there's been so many additions, it doesn't seem like anyone really thought through the whole project from start to finish, because they would add on and put stairs over to that section, and then they added on and they put stairs over there. So there's literally 5 sets of stairs in the house that all go to different levels. And so we are trying to make the home easier for them to live in for as long as possible, basically. So we want to centralize a stair from the garage. Currently, you can't come from the garage up to the main level of the house. You have to go outside and come in either door, or you can go down into the basement, walk through the basement, across the basement, and then come up to the main floor. And all of those stairs are winder stairs, so they are very difficult for someone with mobility issues to travel on. So we're trying to correct some of that by actually putting in a stair from the garage up to the main level of the house. When we're doing that, though, we are taking a bedroom away from the home. It's a 4-bedroom house right now. And so I looked everywhere that I could in the house to see, could I replace that bedroom somewhere else in the space, and kept coming up to conflicts with, it just wouldn't work there. There's no plumbing over there, so I can't have a bathroom by it. And it's, like I said, there's multiple levels, so it just doesn't make sense to try and put a bedroom on the level that isn't already, doesn't already have a bedroom. So just trying to centralize things. And so by doing that, then we get to the second floor. And if this were a normal Cape Cod, which is what the original house was, it would normally have a bedroom, and a bathroom in the center. It doesn't have that. And so there's no way to add that bedroom on the second floor unless we build out over this addition that was approved on the first floor. And so basically, the simplest version is we're asking to be able to raise the roof that was approved on the original variance up a level so that we can build in that space to add the bedroom that they're gonna lose by this. The other factor about the deck was on the original variance request. They were raising the main deck and I did on the drawings and I said approved deck. And on the original drawing, it said existing deck to remain, and that was not true. That we would like the entire deck to be raised so that they can have a swim spa on a portion of that existing deck. And then we actually are removing part of the deck so that our coverage is smaller. Not that we have to refine on coverage, but just kind of a way to ease that burden on the lot. And the final thing is that we really are trying to kind of pull a design together for the house. Right now, there's a two-story addition on one end of the house. There's the original Cape Cod, and that has a kind of an awkward dormer on it that is integral to the structure of the home, and so it can't be removed. But we're just trying to, with the new addition, bring in some of the detail that's there and kind of balance out the look of the Lake Winona elevation. That's the middle one, so that one that you're pointing to. That was, and you can see on there's a picture of the house, like a drone picture. So you can see that's going to
It's
be,
taking this away and just making those.
we're taking the screen porch off. The
Okay.
dormer part of it will remain, and then we're gonna add a window to it, and then we're putting another window
Okay.
next to it, so that we have the egress.
That part doesn't need a variance.
Not really, and technically it is within the shoreline.
Well, that is
Yeah.
that far down.
Yeah, I mean, literally the
Hold
whole
on.
existing house is completely in the side yard.
Okay.
Shoreline. That's what I'm saying, like, there's no, like, I wouldn't even be here if I
Yeah.
could add on that side, because I would just bump out towards the lagoon side if this house were on a lot not adjacent
I
there. So that's really the difficulty with this whole project is they're not being allowed to, they can't add into their house because of two shoreline property. So that's,
And the deck issue that you're talking about is this issue here, that this line here originally
right,
indicated this was the approved section and this
Correct.
little section over here is
Correct.
not.
right, and so, and this is all existing deck right
Yeah.
now, and we're taking that off, it's just we're raising it up to one level.
Okay.
So that, I mean, again, if you look at the picture of the house.
Yeah.
You literally come out and there's like 9 steps down and no railings, and it's like, I don't know who thought that was a great idea, but. We're just trying to improve it so that somebody can stay in this house as long as possible, they can be at one level as much as possible. Getting up to the second floor, like I said, it's a struggle now. I have mobility issues and I struggled on the stairs myself, so I'm like, I get it.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Is there anybody else here to speak on this issue during the public hearing section?
Yeah, I know that Jim is on, but I think he's just here to answer questions or. And then I have my associate here with me. He's been working.
very well, so.
Yeah.
And then, Doug, did you receive any emails?
We did, yes. So I can certainly share that. So this was from 1101 Ashishin Trail Northeast. This is Christina Pirius, the immediate neighbor across the street. They said, writing to communicate their support for the home addition, as proposed. They have reviewed the plans, clear that it will not impact their views. They have channel views, not into the bay. The property owners go through a great deal of hard work to care for the property, making sure projects are well done, maximum benefit. close, excellent relationship as neighbors and discuss questions, concerns for the best care of the property where they connect. And just thank you for the consideration.
And then I did include some other support letters that they received prior to seeing this.
And those are individuals on the same street, across the street, or
So John Roberts lives on Birch Haven Circle, so that's
across the waterway?
correct. So again, he's saying that, you know, his views are not impacted. And then the other one is the immediate neighbor to the what is it?
So,
West, I don't know. Next door.
yeah, the next door neighbor.
Next door, not the bay.
Yep, yep. I think it's a bit like south, but don't quote me.
Yes, you're right. Yes, it is correct, it's south.
Okay.
I'm looking at the map, I'm like, yes, south.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions during the public hearing segment? All right, hearing none, we can close the public hearing, and we can move on to item 6, which is the consideration of action, and this is regarding James and Deborah's house at 1100 Mississippi Trail, and they're requesting a variance from the Monona Municipal Code of Ordinance 480-24D 4D shore yard setbacks for the purpose of building a 2-story addition to the existing property and constructing a raised deck. And this is case number Z003-2024.
Thank you. So Laurie did a good job sort of explaining the request and the reasons for this. The board has seen this before, most recently back in late 2023. The reason this is back before the board is the expansion of the variance. Typically, the parameters of the variance as approved, of course, they do run with the land, not just with the tenancy owners. But they do need to be consistent with that. So the consecutory addition and the other elements that were already discussed, including the modifications to the deck is the reason for that. The changes to the side yard do mean that the only section that would be seeking relief from would be those shore yard setbacks, and that would be on both the lagoon as well as the lake side.
And to probably put our foot forward, that might be on a lot of people's mind. The items that we talked about and discussed to approve the previous approval for the 1-story and raising the deck for the majority of the deck purposes. Can we assume that that can be where we start with a possible recommendation or a possible motion?
I think the
Or do
board-
we have to go back and like find that language? Because I wouldn't want us to be inconsistent in the language now than when we were then, when it's very similar.
I think that's really to the board to decide sort of the hardship and things like that. I think from memory, and I should have included the minutes, I apologize for that. I think the hardship and some of the language certainly was about aging in place. I think that was discussed, and that may be something the board chooses to consider again. And of course, the physical property limitations would be very similar as well. So I think generally there can be sort of some overlap, but I think it's fair to look at this as kind of a new application. But I do think the applicant did a good job of sort of highlighting where, how this works within those parameters as well.
Yeah. So whoever ends up maybe making the motion, we might reference all of the information from the previous approval would also be potentially added into this approval, and then some additional language if there's any additional language, but I'll pause there and let people chime in. Ryan or Brad, would either of you like to go first?
I want to point out this is actually the third application.
Oh, all right.
Correct, they were denied the first time and then they were approved the last time, so this is the third time, so. And we were not involved in the other two, and that's what I was trying to stress, is that there were some areas that were not covered in the first two times through here, and I know that it's highly unusual, like most people who get approval don't come back.
Yeah.
But
You pointed out some more comprehensive issues and now you're trying to take care of them all.
Correct, yes, we're trying to make sure this is the last time that we would have to come through there.
All right, Brad.
just wanted to make sure that we were clear on the record here that there was a December 2021 application.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Brad.
All right, Brad, you have the floor if you want to keep
Oh.
rolling.
I opened myself up.
Yeah.
Can you maybe explain why the plans that were previously approved make the property difficult for the property owner to use it for a permitted purpose?
The previous plans,
Yeah, the previously approved plans.
there's no change that I'm requesting to the previously approved plans. I was trying to include some things that were not included that should have been included. So I don't know if I
And in the
understand.
packet, I think what I read and what I've heard from you is the addition or moving of stairwells to make a uniform location for stairs.
That's added,
And
so,
more accessible, and by doing that also comes with an issue as it relates to a bedroom.
yes, correct, so we are still hoping to do the first floor addition, which was approved for aging in place that would allow a kitchen that is able to be fully accessible. The current kitchen in the house is a kind of a galley style kitchen and very tight and narrow. And so that certainly is part of this process. And then the raising of the initial part of the deck is so that someone can go out onto the deck instead of down a flight of stairs from the main level of the house to use the deck. And like I said, there was just a portion of the deck that was not previously talked about. And so that I wanted to make sure that that was included in this, that definitely is a change to what was previously approved, so. And I believe previously, previously, they were talking about upgrading the stairs on the exterior, which has actually been done. The stair material and railings were made more sturdy and the handrail added to the side. So those things were done, and that was part of that initial package. And they were talking about doing exterior chair lifts for accessibility. And what we're trying to accomplish is that they don't have to go outside to bring groceries in to come upstairs, that they can actually come from their garage with groceries and bring them into their house. They can bring someone in a wheelchair and bring them up interior stairs instead of an exterior stair. If we need to add a chairlift at some point because someone needs it, that could be inside instead of that person being out in the weather that neither of the entries to the house currently has a roof over it, so whoever is trying to use that is in elements at the time. So I guess that is from the previous, and this is what we're trying to accomplish is something inside that's safer for them.
Brad, do you have anything else, or should we move on, and we can always loop back to you?
Not right now.
Okay. Ryan, do you have any questions or comments?
I do recall this. I do recall this plot from last time because I recall not being able to kind of visualize everything that's happening. But I appreciate your explanation today. I think I have a better understanding of the plans today. I'm curious. I had a question, maybe for Doug, regarding the two changes of a higher deck and a second story on the previously approved addition. Does that height of those the second story and the height of the deck, does that have is that seen differently in terms of the zoning, the zoning regulation?
It is because there was a variance associated with it, so let's mainly talk about the kitchen addition, so that was considered by the board, you know, the footprint was considered as well as the height. I think the way I often think about it is maybe the neighbors, I'm not saying it's the case here, but maybe the neighbors were comfortable with 1 story but not 2. Or, you know, sort of adding on, so in both cases with the deck as well as with the addition here on that northern corner, both of those are expansions of what was previously approved, and sort of necessitates, is the reason for this variance request.
Yeah, gotcha. That makes sense. I think for me, you know, looking at the plans and the previous approval, I see this as almost exactly the same as the prior approval. The only difference for me is the second story on that southeast corner. Right, that's the only thing I see as a change from the perspective of what the approach we previously took in describing the approval.
Beth?
So the footprint isn't increasing at all, it's just the height.
The height.
And I'm noting in the minutes from October that we didn't put a condition as far as height. We just put a condition as far as which way the steps went from that.
Correct, and I did correct the steps. I turned them and made sure that it was within the footprint of the existing steps. So,
Yeah, I think to Doug's point, the plans that were before us at that time showed a single story, so although we didn't give a sidewall height. I think by packet, what we approved was what was in the packet, which was showing a single story, so I think it's appropriate that we're aware that, like, if this body sees it similar by footprint and increasing the height, that we at least have that documented for all protection aspects. I see it very similar to, at least I think what you're sharing, Beth, of like, the footprint's the same. I think I don't recall any concerns regarding sightlines as it related to the single story. I don't see any sightline issues as it relates to a second story being added there. The concern regarding setbacks of shore yard has to do with proximity to the lake for lots of different pieces, but it doesn't seem like adding that second story is impacted by any of that second story piece.
Right.
And then the deck correction is actually a reduction in the size of the deck.
that's correct.
And it doesn't encroach any further, it actually reduces down the encroachment. And so actually I see that as an easy addition to the previous approved variance, that this just puts the deck all at one level, and it's still within the same footprint as the current deck's stairs as it
Correct.
relates to shore yard setbacks.
That was a good
Synopsis.
Yeah.
I tried to keep it as simple as I can. Ryan or Brad, any other questions that come up for you?
No, I don't have any other questions.
Brad?
Well, I have reviewed the minutes of both prior applications. I was at the first, but I was not at the second application. And I know my concern with the initial application was that was centered around the unnecessary hardship factor and how the safety issues prevented a permitted use of the property. And I think that some of the conditions of the lot located near the canal, I think, made the property unique. I don't think that was the question. I think it was more of the hardship question and how the safety issues were preventing a permitted use of the property. I mean, I think the question we had at the time, after the first application, was that we already have a, fairly large house that seems to be, able to be used for permitted use. And so getting to the hardship, I think, was where it failed the first time. So maybe, speaking to that a little bit more, since I did not have the benefit of the second application.
So the safety issues really are in that the current entrances to the home are both exterior to the home and therefore are subject to weather, whether it's hot, it's cold, it's icy, it's raining. You're out in that when you come to this home, if you're a visitor or you live in the home. The safety within the home, I have pictures of the, I always call them granny busters. There's 3 sets of stairs that have winders at the bottom of them, or as you're trying to go up or down them. And because of those stairs, they are legal stairs in the state of Wisconsin, but they are extremely difficult if you don't hit them just right. Because they're narrow or too wide in places. And so it's easy to slip, and once you slip, you're gonna fall. And this house is never going to be ADA compliant because it's raised up above grade. You have to come upstairs to come into the house. So we want to make sure that we're making those stairs as safe as possible. We want to make sure that we are able to add to the usability for as long as possible for the current owners. They currently have a bedroom on the 2nd floor. We just want to be able to get them up to the 2nd floor and down from the 2nd floor as easy as possible. We will still have a bedroom that we are increasing the size of the door to it so that someone in a walker or potentially a wheelchair could get into it once they're up to the main level of the house. So all of that is the usability of it, that anybody can go from the house out onto this deck because it's all one level instead of all the stairs that don't have railings. It's really a safety issue as far as just the amount of stairs and the amount of levels there. And like I said, there's been multiple additions done on this house and no one has thought through to the end game of it is how long could somebody reasonably live in this house if they purchased it. As a young person, you certainly have more time, but I don't consider myself an older person, but yet, like I said, I have mobility issues and I felt them firsthand just trying to walk around in the property. So I don't feel that the house is completely safe right now. It's livable, of course, and they maintain it beautifully, but I just feel like there's some fixes that should be done to this house and we need the space to be able to do that.
I think that brings it around to one of the earlier questions about whether we're considering this anew or considering it as an amendment, amending the original variance or granting of the variance.
Yeah. I would say, my understanding would be that it is a new application, that it is seen on its own merits. I think elements, the house can still be one, that those elements still exist. But I wouldn't say, to flip that, I wouldn't say just because the variance has been approved in the past or was denied, as was the case two times ago, that sort of, it should impact it either. So I think the case has been put forward. It's with new information, with changes to the house itself, and I would say that this is a new request for a different design, and that would be the what's considered. Certainly elements that were put forward could be, but as Brad said, different composition of members here, different, and that may alter opinion, but I think previous example, and I think we have in the past looked at if it is a sort of second time that an application or a third time has come through, we have looked at sort of the past to look at the case that was made, or what was the hardship, what was this or that, but I do think it should be seen as its own separate application.
Beth, it looked like you had the previous minutes
Just from October.
from the October one, that's the one I've accessed. We just did what we included in for the hardship aspect, because I think that's perhaps your point, like. The hardship was probably the tough part on the first one and why it was denied, but we approved on the second one. And I want to get to what did we say about the hardship piece?
It's the second set.
It says that the hardship is present through the shore yard setbacks and dimensions of that lot. The property is already non-conforming, making additions difficult. A good attempt has been made by the applicant to comply and remain in the same footprint, and there are no concerns from the public. And this addition is in the public interest. And then there's the condition for the approval to include that no part of the new steps extended beyond the building line of the existing steps is reviewed by the city staff. That's the justification. And just when I look at the elements and I look at things, the way I look at the shore yard setback and the dimensions of the lot go to whether or not there's unique physical property limitation. And not whether or not compliance would make it unreasonably difficult for the owner to use the home for a permitted purpose, maybe not their best use purpose or preferred purpose. And that's where I get stuck with these things. And justifications like wanting a home office aren't necessarily enough, just like wanting a bigger garage usually doesn't carry the day.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and if you remember right, some of the discussion had to do with multi-levels, and I think we probably skipped, and what we put in there much more was regarding the deck and being able to raise that up and get rid of those items of the multiple levels. And I think, if I remember correct, that was also some of the discussion regarding, I think it was that north side. Along the side of the house, there was a weird kind of entry there, and it was to like address all of those pieces, and that was what we saw as the longer term hardship issues as it related to safety mechanisms.
correct.
I remember the discussion that also included, there were multiple stairwells, and I think there was some discussion about trying to address some of those pieces, but it clearly wasn't as comprehensive of a package as what you're presenting today.
Correct,
For correcting the interior aspect.
yes.
And I think more of the aspect was like, well, if we bump the kitchen out, we can fix this one stairwell issue.
Right, right, but it didn't change how you function in the house, and what we're trying to do now is to change the functionality of being able to come from the garage to the main level of the house, and then to go from the main level of the house up to the second floor, all in one chain of stairway, which, like I said, right now you have to go over here and use those stairs. You have to come over here and use the stairs here. You have to go over there and use the stairs here,
Yeah.
depending on where you're going in the house.
And they're all switchback stairs.
And they're all switchback stairs. So we're just trying to correct those things and making the functionality of the house much improved.
I see that as similar to what we had discussed before, but I try to make it a point of my primary role here is as a facilitator, not the motion maker. So I kind of look to the three of you to kind of maybe throw something on the floor as a motion to maybe get things moving in the direction of either approval or denial.
I would make a motion to approve. Quoting the prior approval, I see the hardship is present through the shore yard setbacks and the dimensions of the lot. Considering the purpose of the zoning restriction, I see that the safety or the layout of the house on the existing plot would limit the ability to fulfill the needs of living in the house. I also see that we have letters from the neighbors representing no harm to the public interest. And like I previously stated, there's certainly unique physical property limitations.
There's a second, so then there can be discussion. We need a second so we can discuss.
I'll second for discussion purposes.
All right. Doug, do you have what you need first of all?
I quote that, yes.
Okay, and then, second, this is an opportunity, so there's motion on the table for approval. And that would be for the second story addition. It would include the dormers, and it would include the adjustment to the deck, which are all impacted by shore yard setbacks. So with that on the table, are there any further discussions that others have on the committee?
It would technically include the entire addition, both stories. And
You're
the
right.
entire expansion of the deck.
Because then they could get rid of their old variance, yeah, either way.
Well, no, because aren't we considering it as a new application? So then we have to
Well, their
assume
old one
that,
still exists though.
yeah, what happened?
Yeah, I think no matter what happens today, their old one is still approved.
Okay,
And
So
it's
if
just
they
whether or
left
not,
here and decide not to do today, like if today's is approved and then they scrap it. They could still do item one.
yeah, yesterday's.
Yeah.
Variance,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, kind of a weird one. Okay. Any other questions or discussion points? If not, we'll. All right.
I do have, I do also just want to point out that one of the things that we're supposed to be looking at is also some cumulative effects. And whether or not allowing a second edition for these purposes will basically encourage others to look and try to do similar things. And also I'm not sure that the stairwell issue is enough to prevent a use, especially when we don't have wheelchairs right now, we don't have lifts right now. And I don't think our purpose is to try to look into ADA compliance. That's a building issue, not a zoning issue.
I think well said, and I think Doug, this goes to maybe an additional question for the city attorney, maybe not about this scenario, but in the future, when there are items that are building code related of wanting to do something different, maybe to come in better alignment and compliance with updated building codes and how that then changes the use of a structure, which causes a zoning issue. How are those best addressed? Because I think, Brad, like what you're pointing out is, if they wanted to go that way, and it was really the part that caused the issue wasn't a zoning piece, it was actually the building piece. In the future, should that be seen as a building thing that goes to council for an exception versus coming here for a zoning exception? We will make that a side project.
You don't have enough to do.
Yeah, but another side project. So we have a motion on the floor in a second. Any other discussion points that people want to bring up before we get to a vote? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,
Okay,
Nay.
motion fails. Where this can go from here, Doug, can you help the applicant understand what the process is after this meeting as it relates to this.
Yes, I believe there is the opportunity. Let me double check, but I can give you a call, and we can kind of discuss next steps.
Okay.
I believe it would be city council would be, this the right to appeal. I do believe, Brian, I would need your vote as part of this, because we need 4 votes as part
You
of
need
this.
4 votes, but if there is a tie vote,
It would still fail. It needs, with 4 attendees, we need 3 votes to pass, but I guess for the record.
mine was in favor.
In favor, okay.
So it's a 2-2. I always like applicants to know, like, this body is charged, it's not people like putting on their hat of opinion. I just want everybody to know, because people that are watching, they're probably going, holy moly. So hang on, like, it's important to know, like, we are bound by state statute of how we have to address these pieces. And it clearly lays out the burden of, that needs to be met. And as you could hear, like, there are times that we have to help try to understand the burden as it relates to what's defined in state statute. And it's not always what applicants want to hear. It's not always what we as members of this body have an opinion of, but it's what we have to factually put down. And so sometimes that can come across in a very non-empathetic way, is maybe the best way to put it. But I just want people to realize, like, this body, and Brad pointed out quite clearly, like, that burden is a tough burden to get over. And we're obligated to follow the statute in getting over that burden. So just like to point that out, because I don't want people to leave here going, they all suck. I mean, so,
And it's most often that hardship one.
yes,
With Monona, it's pretty easy to get the lot lines are interesting.
yeah, the other aspects are always the easy one. The hardship is the tough burden to get over. Thank you, and please connect with Doug, so that way you guys can look to see, okay, what's our options moving forward?
Right,
So we'll go from there.
and they'll get a letter, is that correct? Kind of a,
That'll be as well.
Yeah.
That's included.
okay, all right, thank you.
Yes, all right, thank you. Thank you, Jim. It's item 5 and 6. We're on to item 7, which is a public hearing by Henry Collins.
Yeah, that's my dad.
All right, awesome. I always check if I get the name somewhat close. And this is at 4545 Winnebago Road, and they're requesting variance from the Monona Municipal Code of Ordinance, section 480-24D7A. And this is the maximum accessory structural height and the Monona Municipal Code of Ordinance, section 480-24D7C1. Accessory structure street yard setbacks for the purposes of adding a second level to an existing detached garage for accessory dwelling unit, case number Z004-2024. It's a mouthful. So come on up, and as you heard in the first one, like, this is a time for you to share, like, what is it that you're hoping to do? And we might just have some questions to make sure we understand what it is that you're hoping to do, and then we'll.
Okay. I'm a little bit nervous.
No worries.
Okay, so
Completely understand.
as you mentioned, we live at 4545 Winnebago Road. So that's on the Tony Watha Springs plat. It's kind of by that 5-way stop, if you know what I'm talking about, after the bait shop and you go up the hill.
By the boat launch.
Yes, by the boat launch. So we're before you turn down onto Tony Watha. So as you can see, we have a detached garage towards the bottom of the hill. And from the picture, you can see it's kind of totally flat on the top. So what we're looking to do there is to build an accessory dwelling unit, for my dad here. He's the owner of the property. He's currently the sole occupant, in the main house. I grew up in this house. I always pictured myself living in it one day. But obviously my dad's still pretty young, so we were thinking that, given.
Can't kick them out, yeah.
Yeah. Given and especially with the housing market too, and our familial values, we were thinking that, you know, why shouldn't we all live on the same property? I do think that this property presents the perfect opportunity to do so. If you can see from the survey, since it's at the bottom of the hill, I know it's a lake property, it really in no way obstructs like the neighbors. It would not be like next to the main houses of the neighbors, it would be in line with their garage. And because it's graded into the hill, from the perspective of our neighbors, it would actually appear to be a single story. So from the uphill side of, like if you're looking at the structure from our yard, it will be single story, like you step up basically 2 stairs into the house. It does appear to be 2 stories from the road, if that makes sense. So I hope I painted somewhat of a clear picture there. As you can see, the garage currently is also in kind of a state of disrepair, so as part of this project, we would be kind of revitalizing that lower portion. We kind of want to do a stone exterior there and then match the upper portion, which would be the addition to our current house. So the need for variance, as you mentioned, comes from if the whole unit were measured from the bottom of the hill, it would be closer to 25 feet. I know I say 27 here, that's like an extreme maximum because I know you can't ask for more later. So we wanted to play it really safe there. But it would probably be, you know, 4 to 5 feet shorter than that at the end of the day. So yeah, my understanding is that the maximum is usually about 18 feet. That would be very challenging to meet for 2 stories. With the unnecessary hardship, placing this unit anywhere else on the property would pretty much be next to impossible. In the backyard, we wouldn't be able to do that because it would block the neighbor's view. And it's also one of the houses that is kind of on not a cliff, but it's a very steep slope. So that's the backyard. And then in the front yard, to build this unit not on top of the garage just wouldn't really make sense. There's a lot of mature trees in that area. And that would also put it right next to the neighbors. So that wouldn't really make sense either. It kind of seems like the garage was made for this, to have something on top of it, so.
Okay. Any clarifying questions that people have regarding the public hearing section?
Ask more about the maximum height. Is that to the peak of the roof or is that to the trough of the roof?
To the accessory structures, it's often with the pitched roof, it's gonna be to the midpoint. So it's 14 feet to the midpoint, so we've seen, you know, typically it may be sort of some sort of a lofted space with a detached garage, for example. Do you may get some space, but not enough for the full height, 14.
And that goes to the lowest point of the structure.
Correct, so
So it would be measured from the bottom point of the hill.
with this one, it would almost pretty much be bottom of the garage door to the midpoint of the highest peak. High scale.
And Doug, you mean midpoint meaning
Between,
the middle of the truss?
correct. Yes,
So, for example, this might get into a later part, but it's part of the public hearing to question clarification. Because it's a pitched roof. I don't think, do they get an advantage going steeper pitched or?
It would,
the absolute, the other way I guess to frame this, the absolute height of this would be taller because it's pitched versus line.
Yeah.
So we, 14 is the nice midpoint, but of course, doing the math, you could get a 16 or a 17.
Yeah.
Absolute to the peak, but that's the standard and that is how we measure the primary structure as well.
And it could be a gambrel style truss up on top, which would still give you a decent midpoint and more headroom potentially. A different style truss rather than just the triangle, they make one that's. I think it's gambrel is the style where it's got a little bit more living room, yeah, in that kind of upper portion.
So-
we were trying to keep the max, we weren't sure if it was the
The max.
roof, so we were really trying to design it to be as low as possible. And design wise, they said that this is the least amount of pitch they could do while still keeping the ceiling a little bit more open.
So clarify then, it would be more realistically looking at from the base of the garage to the middle of the truss on the second story would be about 17 and a half.
Exactly, that would be measured from a zoning perspective, so.
Okay, okay.
You'd be looking, 14 feet would be the standard, that would be allowable, so in this case, you're 3.5 feet of,
Essentially,
variance.
yeah.
Oh, okay, well then that's much better.
Yeah, but it feels better.
Yeah.
28, I was like, have you seen the sheet? Have you seen that?
I was trying to play it safe, because I didn't want to have to come back here, you know, but, and I also wanted to add to, I forgot to say that we had our neighbors, two of our neighbors emailed, letters of support today. And our other neighbor came to the last meeting, he couldn't come today, but,
Oh,
we did the pre-hearing,
oh,
yeah.
you guys sat and observed, right? What was that?
That was, and I can. There's sort of a conditional use permit side of this with the ADU. Do you want me to do that now or part of the consideration?
Where do you think it benefits?
I think it's fair to bring it up now. Alright. Thank you. So the request here, this is for an accessory dwelling unit. And so I did speak with the city attorney about this, sort of some back and forth, because it needs dimensional relief as is being requested tonight. But also for the use itself for the accessory dwelling unit, that's not typical. And that is something that needs a conditional use permit, which is reviewed by the city's planning commission. So this has been through for a pre-hearing with the planning commission, so there's been no action. But the commission were generally comfortable with the use. And of course, with the conditional use permit, they can attach conditions such as this can never be separated, you know, such that this couldn't be a separate unit or a separate lot. This may need to keep the same address or those kind of things, same meters, same electric, and bills and things like that, which kind of help keep that. And they can do that, so that anything they see reasonable to the request, can be conditioned. So they didn't get too much into the details of that, but I think generally they were comfortable with the proposal. I think there were a couple comments about sort of the architecture of it and how it keeps with the house and things and that go along to the use. But specifically this evening, the request is for dimensional relief for the accessory dwelling unit. So the height and then the street yard setbacks as well. And I can get into that a little bit, but that was sort of the stepped process. So I want, yeah, sort of, I don't know how best do you time this? Yeah. So pre-hearing was planned, ZBA for dimensional, and then yeah, there, yeah, it would go back to planning commission.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Okay.
Doug, one more question I think makes most sense actually in public hearing section. And it maybe connects more with plan. But it's a dimensional issue. And that has to do with when we have a sloping grade and we're looking at height restrictions. Which I know has come up, probably here and there. Particularly on some of these lots that are, I'm going to be truthful, right? Like. Lots are either sloping dramatically upward or dramatically downward. And it's been difficult over time, I know, as it relates to our ordinance of where measurements are taken from, and I know curve measurements are often one of the items that are identified. Which has been problematic and helpful for the applicants over the years of, okay, is it help if you're building up or building in a hole? And is there, from all of those other applicants that you've seen, as it relates to this property and the unique slope of the property, because I'm looking at like the mention of it kind of buried into the ground portions of it. And on the front side, it appears as if there's some sloping. When there's a slope on a structure, is it always at the extreme lowest point, or is it at the midpoint of the lowest point ever?
No, it is always, the language in the zoning code is the lowest adjacent grade. So with that, it would be It's the bottom of the door on a boathouse, for example,
Yeah.
even if that's in the slope, sort of pushed in, and that's probably a good example to use here. With the house, it's walkout basement, if that's possible, if that's present. So we have plenty where it's 2 stories on one side and 3 on the other. So that's sort of how this is done, and in some ways that helps from a measurement perspective. You'd be taken from a concrete base, such as the bottom of the door or something, rather than backfilling and then that eroding away.
Yeah.
And so with this one, it would be from the bottom of the garage door on the street side elevation. Even though, you know, at sort of the rear of it, if you were looking at it from the main property, it looks 1 story, it would be 2 stories from the street.
Okay. This might help. When you look at a different house later on, go, wait a minute, how did that happen? So, the lowest point, even though on one side, the lowest point might be higher. Perfect, and a couple letters.
Yes, I did receive a couple today, and I believe one of the individuals is actually online, so I'll go with the other one first, and if you would like to present himself, he's welcome to. So Daniel Gutman sent correspondence in supporting the project at 4545 Winnequa, lives next door and shares the property line. Daniel is at 4543 and supports the project. And then I see the Olsons are online. I have that letter. Would you like me to share it, or would you like to speak at this point?
Hello.
Hi there.
Yes, I'm in support of it, as the letter says. It only helps the neighborhood. His garage does need a new roof and a little attention there, and all the points they pointed out are correct. It doesn't affect anything for me across the street. It is a pretty good grade uphill, so even with the house there, the peak, I'll still be able to see land over the top of that peak because the hill is so steep rather than the lake, unless I stand on my roof. So from my point of view, where we're at, it doesn't affect anything. It makes the neighborhood look better. They're not taking down any trees or affecting anything in that way, and I'm in support of it.
Thank you. All right, we can close the public hearing section and we can move on to consideration of action. For 4545 Winnequa Road, we're requesting a variance from the Monona Municipal Code of Ordinance, section 480-24D7A, maximum accessory structure height. The Monona Municipal Code of Ordinance, section 480-24D7C1, accessory structure street yard setback for the purpose of adding second level to the existing detached garage for accessory dwelling unit, case Z004-2024. Dustin.
Thank you. So I kind of went through the height requirements here and some of the background of the process for this application. The other one to kind of discuss is the street yard setbacks for accessory structures. Typically, the minimum setback should be 30 feet back from the street, from the property line there. But also there is another clause that accessory structures should not be in front of the house, so they should be in line or behind. So that's sort of the standard that is included. So any garage that you see, typically in front of the house, it should be attached to it, if that makes sense. So no storage sheds or anything in the front yard. That's the reason for the variance request. Certainly, it's an existing location as opposed to the garage, but the addition necessitates that variance.
And Doug, does any of this speak to shore yards are often seen as front yards? And street yards are often seen as backyards for lake properties.
I think that's something certainly the board could consider. Yeah, the yards from a zoning perspective, it's very simplistic. Street yard is faces the street, and lake, shore yard is water. So that's it from a zoning perspective. But some could be something.
I just know that's come up before, especially as it relates to sheds. Everybody wants the shed, and it's like, well, you can't put it in the backyard anyways. You can have a boathouse, but you can't put a shed. And so if you put one, you gotta put it next to your house, because you can't put it on the street side. And you clearly have all of your property on the street side, that makes the most sense, so just one thing to consider. And then as it relates to height, what is the maximum height that is allowable by ordinance?
Maximum allowable would be 14 feet, 1-4, and that would be to the midpoint of the highest gable on the pitch. So with this one, of course, it's just the one gable, but if there was a different property there could be multiple. And so
So
absolutely.
the highest point or the midpoint?
The midpoint of the highest gable. But with this one, it's just. And so that can, of course, lead to the peak being higher than the 14 feet for pitched roofs. There are standards for that, and the measurements would be from the lowest adjacent grade. So with this one, the measurement would be from the street side, bottom of the garage door to the midpoint of the structure. So the 2 stories, just given floor heights or ceiling heights and sort of wall heights, I think that takes it about 14 feet.
Awesome. Anybody want to start? I called on Brad last time, so I don't think it's fair. So that means Ryan, maybe you're first, and then Beth will have to be first in the last one.
Am I clear? It's the 2 issues of the variance on the height and also the variance on the location. Is that a variance as well?
Correct. So effectively, this is being seen as construction of an accessory structure in the street yard forward of the house.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I think, I mean, as we, I think as you mentioned, I think that's something I'm comfortable with, that part of the plan. Certainly, it doesn't seem like we would be asking you to build a garage on the other side of the property, right? I think the height issue is difficult for me because I don't know what the necessary hardship or physical property limitation would be to permit those 3.5 feet. I guess we could consider the grade as being the unique property limitation, because on one side we would be meeting, right, if we measured from the back, we would be meeting the regulation, but we're measuring from the front, we are not meeting the regulation. I also just don't know from a practical standpoint why it just can't be 3.5 feet shorter.
And 3.5 feet shorter. Well, realistically, Doug, from floor to ceiling heights, is that doable even if it was a flat roof, for example?
I don't believe so. I think it would be typical, and I see Jeremy Austin's on there. He might be able to answer this better than I, but I believe it's between 8 and 9 feet would be a typical wall height for either a garage. I think a door would be around 7, maybe, that you would see. And so kind of going up there, you'd already be at that 16 or 17 feet, but something.
Even if it was just purely flat.
And I may be half a foot off or something like that, but I don't think practically that.
You would easily be at 16 feet.
With 2 levels, I don't think it would be possible to come in at 14.
And for argument's sake, if this addition was shifted backwards and only on portion of the garage. Let's say they brought in fill on the backside to make the backside equal with the ground. They poured a footing back there and they slid the thing backwards. And it was partially on the new slab and partially on the garage. Does the height restriction still rely on the front of the garage in a scenario as such like that, or would they have to be completely separate from that? I know this is what else, but I think it helps
Yeah.
with.
I think one of the challenges that I'm glad you brought that up, I believe the footprint here of the garage is 720 square feet, 24 by 30. I think with that math penciled back. So let's say, for argument's sake, it was completely separated. There is an accessory structure maximum of 1,000 square feet as well, footprint. So this, of course, being 2 levels, stays at 720. Were this to be separate, and both be 720, it would need a variance for that as well.
Okay.
So the cumulative total of all accessory structures on the lot is 1,000 square feet.
Okay, but for argument's sake. If we didn't allow it on the structure of the garage, because, for example, it didn't meet these items. Right now, not only are they asking for it to be in the front yard, they're actually asking for 3 items. Front yard, less than 30 feet from the street yard, and height.
And for clarity, I would bucket those two together in that street yard, that it's the same, the 30
The
feet
street
from
and the 30,
They are the
altogether.
same, from a noticing and from the agenda.
Okay.
There's 2 on the agenda, for clarity, I would say they're the same.
Those are the.
Yeah,
Okay.
but there is a dimensional element as well as the location factor that
Yeah.
it's separate from the house. The what if it were stepped back, I would say. My gut tells me it would still be, the measurement would be the same, that it would still need a variance. That it would be the lowest adjacent grade, effectively it's an overhang or.
Yeah, because even if it was to like halfway up the garage, the low point is still roughly the same. Trying to point out options. Chris and Peter's here. Ryan, sorry to cut you off. You might have had more to share.
No,
Okay. Brad or Beth?
I guess one thing I'm looking under the unnecessary hardship is would prevent the owner from using it as for a permitted purpose, and if plan commission is basically going to say this is a permitted purpose, then the variances or the complying with the height and the setback would make it burdensome. Because I don't think even if they pushed it back, the closest point, I think it said was 13, almost 14 feet. And then if you push it back 16 feet, that extra square footage is gonna put you over the 1,000. And looking at the plans, it looks like the height of the walls inside the living structure are like 8 foot, and it doesn't even look like the garage is that way.
The garage is 8 feet, yeah, it's on the inside, yeah. They can't really get any shorter than that.
Yeah.
No.
I think to the height question, if I may, one thing, I was reminded during the minutes of the shed applications, the March meeting. There was a maximum put on that, there was a wall height as a condition, so that may be something that the board considers, that max height to the midpoint, not to exceed that, a number they're comfortable with. I think for clarity, that might be appropriate, given that that's being considered, just to put that as a condition that even if this changes a little bit, if this was put on the pitch or something changes, given there's some uncertainty here, I think a condition not to exceed a number, I think might be reasonable.
In fact, if I understood your kind of statement, is the idea of if plan approves the permitted use,
Right.
by fact of doing that, there is
Well, the variance,
It
complying with
creates-
the zoning variances
Yeah.
would be
you could
really
use it.
burdensome to
Yeah.
actually use it.
So Doug, it sounds like this potentially might end in a pause to come back after that final approval process, that plan. Because if that were true, the undue hardship is met.
I think they've got unique physical property limitations and that they have support from their neighbors that it's not gonna be a harm to public interest. I mean, it is. Right now, I mean, it's on the street that they're like, aren't you going kind of,
Yeah,
You're-
it's a
you're stuck
weird
in
street.
two hills,
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
That's interesting.
Yeah.
so it really would, I agree, it would look like a one-story.
Yeah.
Building for most purposes.
Do you tell them about the neighbors? Is that, I mean, the height of the neighbors?
Oh, yeah, the
Well,
height of the
yeah.
neighbors is much more.
Yeah. And
Oh,
how
yeah.
is it?
I know exactly
And
what the
so-
house.
yeah.
They put on a huge addition, like right before we moved in, actually, because they're big car enthusiasts. And so they have like a triple car garage with 2 stories above that, basically. And so this would just be, this would be tiny compared to them.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting how those things kind of sometimes work out, that something might fit within the ordinance, even though it seems very, very different. Brad, I'm looking to your take on Beth's reasoning regarding if plan went first and they actually approved it as an appropriate usage. And then it came to us that there was a approved usage within these parameters, but you logistically couldn't do it, wouldn't they be meeting that hardship issue?
I think it's an interesting idea.
We haven't always used permitted in that context.
Right. Yeah, it's Beth with her creative thinking cap on tonight. The way I read it and the way I view it, is the property as a whole, is the property still available for use of with a permitted use, or not, and what they want to do. So I don't know. I'm a little on the fence about that. It seems like almost a little bit circular reasoning. At the end of the day, we still have a property that has a permitted use. And essentially, if I'm understanding correctly, someone tell me if I'm wrong, because it wouldn't be the first time today. That essentially this is going to look like a 1-story house that's real close to the road. And it leads me to ask whether or not it was considered or even feasible just to add on to the principal building.
And can I answer that?
Yes, absolutely.
So I think part of the reason that we wanted an accessory unit was that, you know, as my partner and I intend on expanding our family and as my dad ages, the intention is I know accessibility itself isn't a necessary hardship or doesn't really speak to that, but this unit itself would be more accessible as he ages and we would like to both have our own independent spaces that we live in. The principal house is not that big, and of course, if you did add on to it, it would be bigger, but then we wouldn't have our spaces independent of each other. And that house it's actually kind of similar to the first one where there's a lot of different stairs and such, so it's a lot more practical for my dad to have his own space that's only 1 floor and for us to have our own space for our growing family. I mean, that's what went into this, the thought behind it at least.
Yeah, the only other piece I would add is there are other garages that have definitely structures built above them. Some other variables are slightly different, though. And sometimes they're placed in different locations. I'm thinking of some of our sheds that have ended up being 2-story sheds with. It might not be a full living unit up above, but it probably could be a full unit living up above. those have not been approved for living units because they haven't gone to the plan commission for that purpose. But I think it would be similar in size and in structure to what Brad, you're pointing out of like. In feasibility, isn't this essentially a house?
Yeah.
On the street?
Yeah, and if we just look right there at like the handout, the figure 25 that comes in our packet. I mean, it clearly lays out that circumstances of an applicant, growing family, elderly parents, desire for a larger garage. In this case, I'm kind of viewing that as a larger garage, even though we have the AUD, and it's not really a larger garage per se, but it specifically says it's not a legitimate factor in deciding a variance. So like those elements alone can't get us there. And what we're essentially asked to do is to put a one-story house well within the 30-foot setback.
And Doug, this goes to that 1,000-foot question. 1,000 square feet question. If they were pushed back to the 30-foot mark, they would be over the 1,000 square foot, we think,
I think
math wise.
16 times 24 is 384. I think that was,
And that's if they go halfway back.
if they go back enough to meet the setback, the 30-foot setback on the nearest corner.
And do I remember, I can't remember if it was part of this body or part of plan commission when there was a structure and it was not connected to a house. So we talked about an overhang that connected a structure to a house. And if that was considered the same structure.
Yeah, we have seen it in the past. Generally, I have required from a zoning perspective that they be connected. We've seen some, for example, that have tried to get the relief, the benefit from being a detached structure, but then also building it up or trying to build, second story on it or something like that. So my intention really is that if it's a breezeway, it looks like a breezeway and it actually acts and should arguably be separate, or that it shouldn't be connected, it shouldn't be the whole way along. If it is connected, there should be drywall, there should be, elements that make it a livable space as well. So that sort of has been the thinking in the past. Yeah, I think there's definitely the spirit consideration as well, and I think I have to work in extremes in my condition, and a 100+ foot breezeway connectivity is too probably is not the spirit.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's where you were going, but that I would not classify that as part of it.
And if they were in the street yard but back 30 feet, it'd be over the 1,000 square feet, but what if it was permitted use above the 1,000 square feet? But the 1,000 square feet is our zoning. That's what's odd, like Brad, I hear your point of like, well, the property is still usable under its zoning. But if plan commission grants appropriate use of something different that exceeds our zoning, don't we have to comply with that decision? It's like there's, if they say you can have an extra structure in the front yard in excess of 1,000 square feet, do we then read this as needing to comply with that?
Well, if they had, you could put a 2,000 square foot structure in the front yard and not need a zoning variance.
No, you can't, because it's separate than the main structure. 1,000 square feet is the maximum.
But if plan commission allowed for it,
Yes, that's.
and then it didn't encroach on any of the setbacks.
Is it?
Plan's determination will only be for the use. And so,
Okay, now this-
correct, so let's say there was a one-story structure that's being proposed that meets the 1,000. It's 250 square feet, for argument's sake. If that were the case, and it was within setbacks and it complied from a dimensional perspective, it would just be plan commission for the conditional use permit. It would not be I certainly understand the point, but the discussion tonight is dimensional. The height, 3.5 plus minus on height, as well as the expansion of a structure in the street yard, accessory structure in the street yard, and that it's too close, and it's within the 30 feet.
Yeah.
But I take the point about the hardship, the permitted use side of things. I understand that. I think the other element may be the consideration under that first point of figure 25 could also be the purpose of the restrictions, kind of considering those elements, you know, the height standards and some of those things could also be considered, not just the use, you know, the rendering it unusable, for example. That maybe something else to. I appreciate the circular nature of this.
Yeah, and I like that you pointed to that first bullet, that like the purpose of the zoning restriction. It would meet I would argue that it would meet the hardship aspect if there was an appropriate use deemed by plan commission. I could see the hardship being that the zoning restriction overly restricts the ability to do it.
So plan commission doesn't care if it's 1 story or 2, right? It's just whether or not there's a residential.
ADU.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Just speaking to the use of it too, one thing that kept coming up in the planning commission meetings that in 2016, Monona like laid out these goals to try and come up with more creative ways for you know, more creative housing opportunities essentially. And they, you know, one person said, if there's a situation, you know, where you would do it, this does represent a perfect opportunity. And as part of that goal, they had said that the lots in Monona do like present a good opportunity for these units specifically because some of them are very long. And so, yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I'm sure everyone knows that, but we saw that and we thought that that was very encouraging and that it's not just, you know, something that we want to do, but a very good option.
Absolutely. Are there thoughts from the group on how they'd like to proceed? I could encourage us maybe to think or consider, and this might not be the done. Like shake your head, no, like, no, you don't think this is a good idea. Like, I think knowing what the plan commission's outcome will help this body come to a decision. I know that lengthens the time of things, but I think that part is important for us as we consider item 1, undue hardship, which is going to be a hard piece.
Good question. Did you consider moving the whole building back?
The whole building?
Like raising it and just
Yeah.
starting further back, yeah, but then expenses of it start to get out of reach.
Well,
And we also wanted to work, well, sorry.
okay, so yes, the reason why they thought it was perfect, the plan commission, is because given that it is a little bit, you know, closer to the neighbor's house, currently right now it's just next to their garage. If we were to move the entire thing back, that would then make it right next to their house. And given that, like, they're very much in support of this project, probably because it's in no way, you know, close up next to their house. It's not like you're looking into each other's windows. Their garage is like actually has a pitched roof too, so it's like kind of lofted in there as well. So this structure would actually look very similar to the structure that's directly next to them actually, and their garage is also as close to the road as ours. So I do understand that, you know, you don't just wanna have a single story house like next to the road. But it really will not stick out in comparison to the neighbors because they have something just like it, so.
Yeah.
But yes,
From a
we
drive
did think about that. I'm sorry, kind of long-winded sometimes.
Others' thoughts on how they might want to proceed? Doug, do you have any concerns based on my suggestion of potential of a table?
A table. I keep going to the terminology of the first point for permitted purpose. So specifically, the conditional use permit is saying that this is the request of the applicant is that this is a secondary use, that the ADU is secondary to the primary use of the house. That it's a permitted element to do that, and that it meets performance criteria for the use. And so from that perspective, I think the scheduling of that after planning commission action is reasonable. But I also struggle with the circular, you know, sort of chicken and egg of who goes first. That a planning commission approval of a CUP conditional on ZBA approval seems forcing the hand in some ways, so I
I
struggle
think
with
we would be asking them to approve the conditional use permit and describe what that would be and the location of that. Because then I think it does come, then we could then make the decision of does it meet the hardship act. I would think it does to what you mentioned of like, it's approving a secondary use. So the use of the main home it no longer applies. We're finding out that the conditional use can't be used.
Planning commission is basically saying he can have his own separate residence on the lot.
Yeah. In this
Or in
location,
this location, well,
yeah, at least in the short or in the street yard.
or he can use the accessory building as a home,
yeah.
secondary home.
Yeah, I would say the use performance standards that were discussed, you know, that there are elements that sort of discuss general conformity with the neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know, this is not that it's generally in keeping. There were architectural discussions that came up as part of the plan commission that the siding will be similar. That these will be related properties. They will not, or structures, they will not be completely separate. Which I think goes to the use comfort from the commission, or at least what we heard at the pre-hearing, that they would be comfortable with the accessory dwelling unit, and again, that it's related individuals that would be living on the same lot. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that they're certainly not approving the location, but I think the concept of the second story ADU, rather than a separate structure, I think would be a part of that consideration.
Because then potential hardship would be the raising of a unit and moving it, like the cost of doing all of that becomes a hardship. So I think it's rolling the dice, but I still think a tabling makes sense.
I think for me, it gets rid of the expanding your family or.
Yeah.
Because that's not a part of the consideration anymore. It's
You can't-
whether or not
Can't
it's.
do it the use that you've already been given. If you have anything to say it now, because if someone does make a motion to table and there's a second, we're done.
I turned the case law. Because we're a quasi judicial body. I say this not infrequently. And we heard Doug say it. at the end of our last consideration. And we have standards that we have to look at. And we do have a little bit of circular logic here, maybe chicken and the egg kind of situation. But at least for me, at the end of the day, we have the case law that says that an unnecessary hardship is present when compliance with the ordinance would do one of two things: unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for permitted purpose. For example, if a lot is zoned residential, would complying with the ordinance prevent the lot from being used as a home? If the property owner is already living in the home on the lot and then they are prevented from using the property for residential use. That's the Zervogel versus Washington County Board of Adjustments case. Or it has to be an unnecessarily burdensome view of ordinance purposes. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court has weighed in on this too. And as I mentioned before, it specifically said that growing a family and personal inconvenience do not constitute practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship which justify a variance. It is not the uniqueness of the plight of the owner, but the uniqueness of the land, which is the criterion. That's Snyder versus Waukesha County Zoning Board, 1976. And when I look at those standards, it's really hard for me to say that, can this still be used as a, can the home be still used? Can the property still be used as a home? Yes. And growing family, aging family, elderly parents just don't meet the standard that's set out by the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And as much as I sympathize, and I do, because I think in a lot of these cases, I think that people have good practical ideas. I really do. But when it comes down to it, we have to turn to the standards and what the law sets out in both the ordinances, the statutes. Quite frankly, sometimes the authority of the zoning board comes directly from the from the Wisconsin Constitution. And we have to look to those resources and how the cases have interpreted these standards. And it's just really hard to get there under the justifications that were being provided.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What would be a hardship then? So aging and family isn't, but what's just an example of a hardship? I'm just curious what.
And Brad, do you have any of those pulled up of items that have met the hardship criteria?
I mean, the one that was cited in the case is that there was it's a harsh hardship, but it's an obvious hardship. Someone was already in a house and then it was rezoned out from under them to be in like non-residential. So they literally couldn't comply with the new zoning when it was rezoned. But it has to prevent a reasonable use of the property.
Yeah, so to be completely honest,
Well, that's the circular argument that we're in. If a plan approves an ADU, that's where we're in this conundrum that you're hearing of like, well, hang on, the property can be used, but the conditional use wouldn't be able to be used in the location. And I think that's what that's what you're hearing us still struggle with. That piece of, you can still use the lot as a residential, you can still use the house as a residential home. Even if they approve on a conditional use permit for an ADU. Well, you could put an ADU in the yard, let's say, but you can't exceed the 1,000 square feet. And that means you got a 200 square foot item you could build.
Yeah.
Behind the garage.
So, yeah. I mean, to be honest, what I had in mind when I wrote the letter and came in here, I was reading that matrix similar in the way that you interpreted it. Which was that, in the case that, or considering the case that the board is the planning commission is supportive of it. So I was reading it as more so the burden of proving that it would, or that showing that it would be burdensome to comply with the variance. That was my understanding of what I was trying to show today.
Yep.
So.
And I think that's what you heard some of us referencing.
Yeah,
That's why it's important that we're all, like, we represent lots of different backgrounds and understanding, and it's important for this body to have that. I still think, even given the difference of opinion that I think you've heard here today, I still think the best path forward is a tabling to hear what happens at plan. For then this to be reconsidered with a knowledge of what happens. We've done a lot of what ifs. But it really depends on what comes out of there. I think might be important for this body to know at that point.
absolutely.
Cause I think if you just rebuilt the garage. That might be something different, might be looking at it differently because. It's reasonable use of your property, it would be hardship to pull the garage up the back.
Yep.
But you're asking to exceed it with more space.
I know we could talk about this for hours. But trying to keep us somewhat moving a forward direction. I still encourage someone to possibly make a motion for tabling. With the idea that we would want to hear what the outcome is from plan, and then we get to do this all over, but at least we'd have we have a great understanding of what you're trying to do here. We might have a better understanding of how these two pieces interplay together. This is not a very familiar area. I don't think we've ever had a conditional use permit for accessory dwelling considered at a plan area that would have a variance connected. Like, I think you're correct. You're in new territory here, so it's important for us to have, I think, some time to think through those elements before the decisions rendered.
Okay.
I'll get to decide.
And
Correct.
I'm gonna motion to table because I think we are in a chicken and the egg situation. And
Yep.
I'm really curious to know how this plays out on the other side of this.
Yeah,
Before we just like shut the door on these good people.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Do we have a motion for a table?
I'll second.
And there's a second. All those in favor say aye.
I
Opposed? All right, table. That just means it sits here until it gets brought back.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know it was a lot, but learning a lot, yes. If you want to fill out applications, we got a board, they're on the website. We're always taking applications. All right. Take care. We should advertise for anybody that shows up, like,
Thank you.
here's something to apply.
Good night.
Thank you, good night. All right, so we can skip over item 10, over on item 11, which is a public hearing for Lisa Ellinger. Close up, and Andrew Richards at 4553 Winnicott Road, and they're requesting a variance for Monona Municipal Code of Ordinance, section 480, 24D4B side yard setbacks for and Monona Municipal Code of Ordinance, section 480, 24D4D shore yard setbacks for the purpose of building a new lakeside addition and deck replacement. And this is case Z006 2024. You don't live far from our laptop.
No.
Walk our dog right behind me. All right, I was gonna say, hang on, did I read one of these wrong? So you've heard my spiel. This is the time for you to tell us what it is that you're trying to do.
Great, thank you. We're also joined by Jeremy Olson online here. He is been working with us the last 3 years on this project and is available to answer any questions you might have on the construction or layout or design or what have you. We respectfully request approval of these two setbacks to allow us to do a new lakeside addition and to replace our current deck. We believe that this request is keeping with the spirit of both the ordinances that are under consideration. And more importantly, will allow us to remain in our home, hopefully, as we continue to age, which I know it's not one of the criteria.
No worries.
But it's important to us.
Yep, don't throw the script out. No.
So as our application letter notes, the side yard setback is needed to place steps from our current deck which are long past their useful life. They're made of timber and are completely rotting away. The current steps already infringe on the 7-foot setback, and the newly designed steps that we have envisioned will actually be closer to our side of the property line. It will be less of an infringement on that line. The shore yard setback would allow us to expand our kitchen and dining room and deck to allow us and our guests to better access and use those spaces. They're currently quite cramped and do not allow for good traffic flow, particularly for less mobile individuals, such as our parents and perhaps us someday. You'll see photos in the packet. So photo 7 is really our current steps going down. And then photos 5 and 6 show the deck and kind of how it's used today and how it's a little bit, and it's about an 8-foot deck. And we're looking for it to be 12 feet so that you can actually move your chairs out, get in and out and use the walkway to the steps as well. I think importantly, the addition of this new addition and deck will still be more than 75 feet away from the high water mark on the lake. So this isn't 50 feet from the lake, where when this is all said and done, we'll still be 75 feet away from the lake. And because we're on a ridge, as you heard from the last set of individuals here, we're over 10 feet above the water as well. So this is not really going to be right on top of the lake and so forth when we're all said and done. And we think that part of the big hardship here is the placement of the meander line, and you'll see on the last map that you have there, it shows where the lake is, and you can see where the meander line is for us. And on the east side, it's 31 feet away from the lake, and on the west side is 35 feet away from the lake. And if you continue along lot 1 and 2 and you go closer to the boat landing, it gets closer to like 20 or 21 feet for others. And if our meander line was their meander line, we wouldn't be here today. So the way our lot is, it's not a square, it's a parallelogram. Our house is not laid squarely on the lot either, which makes it challenging to do some of the work we want to do. But importantly, if the meander line was just, and I don't know how these things are set, but they seem to be different for each lot. But if that line was out closer to where our neighbors are, 20 feet of, to 20 feet rather than 35, this would all fit within what we're trying to accomplish and still be 75 feet away from the lake. So let me just stop there, and Lisa, I know you have some things you wanted to share.
Yeah, I'll be brief because it's already late. But as Andy said, we've been working with Jeremy for the better part of 3 years and have been kicking around different options for closer to 5. Just to say we did not come into this lightly. We tried to educate ourselves on what hardship does and doesn't mean, though I've been further educated here tonight, including thank you, Brad, for teaching me about some legal cases I didn't know about before. But as Andy said, we are threading some needles here. We have a 1950s house with many original elements, including the taupe GE oven that still bakes like a dream somehow.
That's great.
And the narrow, awkward lot with a house that is slightly askew and trying desperately to protect just beautiful old growth oaks and not go any closer to the lake than we need to out of environmental concerns and being respectful of our neighbors. And so we're just trying to balance a lot of things in a thoughtful and affordable way. So again, it's already late, but I do want to say one thing. I just want to thank you all for your public service, because like Andy and I have been grilled by legislative committees, and you guys are so thoughtful and so knowledgeable, and you give up your free time and evenings to do this, and that's what makes Monona great. So I want to say thank you. And I say that whether you approve or reject what we brought you today, but it's been fascinating to watch you all, and Doug, Andy has spoken glowingly about how much you've provided help as well. So but again, it's late, and I think you said it all, Andy, so I'll just stop there.
But I can't leave well enough alone. So I do want to add just 1 or 2 other little things. And I really did appreciate our first conversation. And as you know, I came back from that and said, you know what? We've been after this for 3 years, but let's not get on to the next meeting. Let's go back and talk with our builders, see if there's a way to redo this, redo that and avoid this. But we're here obviously today because we really weren't able to. If I could just, call your attention maybe to the second legal sheet that you have in here.
Yeah, and I just want to see, Jeremy is unmuted, and Jeremy, I want to see if that was an intentional and if you wanted to say something.
I just wanted to be on the ready to
Okay,
participate
okay.
if needed. Again, that you guys you're trying to do something on a lot that is, it's really narrow. The rear lot line is really, crooked compared to everyone else around you, and it makes it difficult to add out what you want to do. You go any direction and you're going to go over a side yard or a rear yard, and everything you're doing it's right there within really close where we need to be, and not taking into consideration where the one neighbor's way out there, way past where you guys can be. And it has to do with that meander line, or if you consider it the high water mark, whatever you want to consider that build line to be. In Monona, it's the meander line. But for the high water mark, you guys are way well and beyond that. You're not going beyond any of the neighbors. Everything you're proposing to do is really close to where we need to be, and it would make it work. To take down the whole house would be a shame. It's in great condition for its age. It's crooked on the lot, which makes it hard to add on to, but to use that house and to not have to disturb any of those mature oak trees or infringe on your neighbor's views. I think that the plan that you have laid out here and all the thought we put into it to try to get around it, this is as minimal as we could be to get what you want to make work.
Thanks, Jeremy. Just one other thing just to point out, because as you heard me say, we've been really at this and trying to figure out how do you do this. And so the second legal sheet is like the existing floor plan, and you can see the dining and kitchen there connected together. And there's like a little island between the two of them right now. But in between the living room and the kitchen and dining room, that is a floor to wall
Ceiling.
Yes.
Floor to ceiling.
Floor to ceiling wall, yes. And in there is a refrigerator, and then there's cabinets on both sides of that. So this is a really tiny kitchen. And with not a lot of cabinet space. So that actually holds a lot of cabinets, and that's where the refrigerator is. And so, but we really want to get rid of it because it creates really bad walkways for individuals. And again, if you have walkers or something like that, it's difficult to get into the kitchen. And importantly, in the living room, there's very little space that is very difficult to get, to the deck or back that way with that wall in there. So we really would want to get rid of that wall, but that means you have to put a kitchen somewhere or a refrigerator somewhere and cabinet somewhere, and it really doesn't fit anywhere else in this design if you get rid of that area. Because we have tried to do this with many designers and try to figure out where can you put the refrigerator, where would you have an oven, and where would you put cabinets, and there just isn't room. And particularly with the dining room there right now, it's difficult to get chairs in and out again, just like it was on the back porch. So that's why it's taken us so long to actually get to where we are. But and that's really what we're trying to accomplish. And as Jeremy said, if that meander line was differently placed, like it is for a lot of other lots, this would all work, obviously. But let me just stop there, because I think, unless you have questions, obviously, there's on any of the photos or designs or anything.
I have a real naive question. I don't know. When something appears as if a meander line is inappropriately placed, how does that get rectified?
It's the history of the meander line is that it is a line established by surveyors, effectively as binding as property boundary. And so the theory behind them, as I understand, was that this is a line that would not be subject to coastal issues or erosion, or the height of the lake. So it's not sort of the lake level that day, 50 feet back from when it was surveyed or anything like that. It's pretty unusual, I would say, to see such variation between adjacent lots. Typically, it sort of runs some, the meander line is basically the shoreline. So it's 50 from the shoreline, 52 maybe, especially the lower lying areas such as Belle Isle, Dutch Haven, such. There are a couple on Tony Awatha, a couple on Winnicott that have this greater setback, but it is a little bit more like 75, let's say, because there is a sort of significant portion from the lake to the meander line. The question came up a couple of years ago, and I believe that it can be reset by a surveyor, the meander line can. Of course, there are questions about that, just the same as the property boundaries and such. It's sort of a similar can of worms in that sense. I have never seen it replatted or moved. And again, it's that question did come up. I think there would be should be a discussion of sort of the adjacent properties as well, just the same as if we were to ever adjust the shore yard standards from meander line to high water mark or something. What impact does that have, not just on the applicant, but also on their neighbors? And does everybody gain 10 feet, or does everybody become non-compliant? So that is the challenge. So a long-winded way of saying I have not seen it. I've not seen it done, but it would be, the surveyor would typically be the one to do that. That it's sort of that realm, and not something specific that the city would do. From a meander line, it's just a meander.
Sure. So we've had this survey twice now, trying to figure out what's going on. So either those surveyors can change that meander line.
It came up and
nobody's gone.
I mean, because like they do a CSM work for us all the time, like.
It did come up, and I think it was 4 years ago now, maybe, if I was guessing. I forget the outcome specifically, because, and I think the city attorney had concerns of the applicant having the same surveyor that surveys it, that says this is variance, then moving pins, and then I think there was some concerns about that. I think it would be a conversation with the attorney, again, just to kind of see what, and that ultimately never went to. It was not done, and the applicant did come through and seek a variance. I think this is probably another that I would chalk up to an ultimate discussion of adjusting from a meander line setback for the shore yard. That this would be an example to say this is actually, and compare it with the adjacent properties. I think that is pretty telling. Just as an example of the differences from a future ordinance adjustment from the end.
If we took the midpoint between the two outer points, it smooths out that line.
Yes.
And maybe I'll close the public hearing section and then we'll have that discussion.
If in the past, and I've done this before, and having to go with the shore yard setbacks, where they just connect the point from the neighbor's lot to the other neighbor's lot. And if we don't go beyond that point, then we're all good. And what they're proposing to do does exactly that. It connects the 2 points from one neighbor's deck to the other neighbor's deck, and their deck does not encroach beyond those 2 connecting points. The one neighbor is well beyond the setback. I don't know how or when it happened, but they're more closer to what the high water mark would be rather than the meander line. So I don't know if there's a change in code somewhere along the line. I couldn't find the history in it anywhere of when it changed, or how they determined that their deck was legal to do. But it makes it really hard for these guys to do anything when theirs is the maximum setback right now. If you go with the meander line, puts them well beyond their neighbor's deck. But if we could connect the 2 points, they're beyond it, and the variance wouldn't even be necessary. They're still what they're proposing to do is behind both of the neighbor's yards when you connect deck to deck.
Well, at least deck to deck, and I'm gonna officially close the public hearing section. I'll open up item 12, which is a consideration of action. By Lisa and Andrew regarding 4553 Winnebago Road, and they're requesting a variance from the Monona Municipal Code of Ordinance, section 480-24D 4B, side yard setbacks, and Monona Municipal Code of Ordinance, section 480-24D 4D, shore yard setbacks for the purpose of building a new lakeside addition and deck replacement. Case number Z 006-2024. And Doug, I'll have you kick us off and then we'll jump right back in.
Yeah, thank you. So the two variances being requested here, shore yard setback, which is 50 feet from the meander line. One of the exhibits from the surveyor sort of shows this really well, shows the setback lines, shows kind of the triangle effectively of the deck, what really exceeded request the variance. I think it's the penultimate sheets in the packet. So it shows that, it shows the encroachment area, and that is taken as 50 feet. And then the addition also of the sort of the landing as shown. If you go back on a couple of the sheets from the floor plans themselves, it shows the steps running all the way down because of the grade, as was mentioned, beyond the proposed deck. So I believe this one from the surveyor just shows kind of the landing, but the steps can extend all the way into that shore yard as well. I see. I know that's the sheet, yes, as you're referencing. So the ordinance does allow for uncovered steps to encroach from the setbacks, but no more than 3 feet in height, given the number of steps here and the grade change. So it was really out of an abundance of caution to be noticing both the side yard, which is the 7 feet setbacks for the steps, but also the shore yard as well.
And the steps, I have it correct, you understand it all correct. Reduction in encroachment on side yard. But
Yes.
the projection to the shore yard still wouldn't apply.
Exactly, and really you could argue that the demolition of the existing and the rebuild, even though it is less of an encroachment, it still is. I believe it is still an encroachment within that. So it is the 7.5 foot point that is shown on here, I believe, is to the landing that's within that. It is not a measurement to the 7.5. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, it looks like it dots all the way in.
All the way in.
Yeah.
And so the landing and the steps it removed the grandfathered and then it's being constructed. So that's the reason, certainly that kind of bundled together. The steps come with the deck requested is.
And the elevation of the steps, the neighbors to the east of us. The difference between their yard and our yard, you'll see on one of the photos there, is like 3 feet already, because we already came the wall between. So even to this day, they don't really see our steps because they're above it and next to it. So
And in some essence, these steps could actually be part of a retaining wall.
well, and they
I mean,
are.
it could be seen as a
Yes.
I mean, they are right now.
Yeah, and they will partially.
They
Yeah,
are
they're
really
part of a
wall.
retaining wall, and they are, I mean, it should be noted that those steps are right on top of a 200-year-old oak tree. And to redo them in any way bigger would dig into those roots. To do anything different would potentially compromise that tree. So we're trying to, if anything, the stairs are going to be narrower, closer to the house. They're going to go out almost the same distance, maybe 2 steps farther than they do now, but that would be made up not with actual steps, but with like pavers or the grade, because of the way the grade is on that side, to not dig into that mature oak tree. Where the big thing about this, and part of what they're trying to do, to twist the house and tear it down and turn it straight and do what they want to do, they'd still have to tear down a 200-year-old oak tree on the front and the back of the house. All of this is done around those oak trees. Not a single aged oak will be touched. And being less stairs, taking up less room, but just up to code and sturdy. Though it does encroach agreeably into that 7.5 yard setback, they will be there just like the stairs are now, but on top of the big root ball of that really old oak tree that is the main part of what's in that 7.5 yard setback. That thing takes up 3 feet of it.
Yeah. And Doug, what I was referencing earlier, regarding the 2 points and the meander line smoothing it out, didn't have to do with the deck, because we already know one deck's already out of compliance. Like, so I'm gonna throw that out for the moment. And I was actually taking the far end points on the old plat sheet. And where it says fine bar 3/4, like clearly the 2 meander line points of the adjacent properties are at least within the 31-foot mark, if not closer. And if we actually drew a line between those 2 points, this is within reason. I know we had a conversation regarding placement of a shed recently. And we talked about, if I remember right, we talked about, although it crosses over the setback in the shore yard, it was the most appropriate location for it, and it still was adequately away from the ordinary high water mark and appeared to be in alignment with the adjacent properties meandering lines as it relates to the larger property scope, like trying to smooth out rather, because there's no way a meandering line makes these kind of right angle, like not right angles, but like straight angle cuts, like the concept of a meander line is gonna be that, it's gonna meander. But it's gonna be smooth is what I'm getting at. And so the idea of, we talked previously about a scenario of when we've gone into that shore yard setback, we've smoothed out that and made a consideration as it relates to other setbacks, where is it appropriate, and the ordinary high water mark as one of the elements to help smooth that out. Because the ordinary high water mark tends to be a more smooth line.
Yes, and I would say from a zoning perspective, this is another quirk of the ordinance, is that there is discussion in the shore yard about adjacent properties. I think to the point that Jeremy was making, and I think other municipalities do this. The opinion, and it has remained this way, and I just recently found correspondence from quite a few years ago about this. It talks about measuring adjacent properties as structures, thank you, yes, for purposes of setback measurements. But it actually is the other way. It's going beyond 50 feet, not within 50 feet. The way it's written, it's very
More restrictive.
more restrictive than less. I'm losing words on the side.
Yeah. No, that has to do with the view issues,
And yes.
Yeah.
of wanting to pull people back more.
Yeah,
So from a zoning perspective, from a variance perspective, it is always 50 feet from the end of the line. It's never 45. If the 2 neighbors, for example, it would be to the detriment of the applicants here. Just with how it's written, it is very odd if you read it, just the way that it is. So from a zoning perspective, we don't have a way of measuring that out. The board can certainly consider that tonight from the underlying perspective or adjacent properties views, things like that. But tools that I have, we don't have that available.
All right, I promised I would start with Beth.
I think, I mean, the question of the meander line is that in the spirit of complying with the ordinance, that's not necessarily. The meander line can only do so much as far as estimating, a line along a lake, and that this is one of those times where it just goes to an extreme. Or extremely far in, just because of the way that it's, drawn. Then that would, complying with that is not really in the spirit of what we're looking for. We're looking, to keep people from encroaching on the lake, which, you're doing your best to not encroach.
For order's sake, I think it goes to Brad next.
I think these are always tough. We have a lot of these meander line issues that come up. I think we've discussed meander lines quite a bit. I recognize that sometimes meander lines can be, or at least seem to be, a bit arbitrary. And I think other communities may do it differently, if my memory is correct. But I also recognize the purpose of the setback is to protect our shore, the wildlife, and the lake in general. I think I heard it mentioned that, you know, that it's going to be up to code, and I want to be clear, do we need to bring anything? Is anything not in compliance with the building code at this point? Are we bringing anything up to code?
I think everything is up to code, but I don't know, Jeremy?
Yeah.
The building itself or in code as regards to what?
I mean, the stairs, the deck, is anything out of compliance with the code, the building code?
The stairs that are there now are in the setback.
Okay.
And we're gonna replace those stairs with stairs that are smaller, narrower, less into the setback.
Gotcha.
The deck itself is 43% of it goes beyond the meander line.
I think, Jeremy, the question was if the existing steps on the existing deck are to today's code, is that correct, Brad?
Yes. Oh, on the deck now?
Yes.
The current deck? No, sorry. Everything is really echoing and a little bit on my side for what you guys are saying. The current stairs, I don't know if they're to code, but they're not in good shape. They need to be replaced. And part of those are timbers that are built into the land, so they're not actual stairs. The steps go down and then it turns into timbers that make up the stairs through the land itself, through the elevation. So if it came into, like we said, you can't go 3 more steps, you're beyond it, we could make that up with elevation change in just the yard itself, the way the yard is set up around that big oak tree. We can make natural landscape steps rather than actual stairs to finish out the end of it past where it might encroach upon that meander line more than what you guys are acceptable of. The stairs, I feel an easy one to get around.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Sorry, somebody's talking outside. There's nobody in the room.
Yeah,
talking.
something's
We close the door as far as we can.
and is the entire screen porch an existing non-conforming?
No, it's the same as the deck. So the screen porch is below the deck above. And it's
Okay.
As you're looking at the house, the left side, the west side of the deck is the part that goes over the meander line or goes into the setback the most, but that's the side that the neighbor's house deck goes way beyond and past the meander line and the shore yard setback over there. It's not, I know that we can't do what everybody else does, but just to get out where we need to be, it still doesn't go as far as they are. I believe the owner attached photos showing kind of where they set in comparison to the neighbors looking out the shore yard.
If you look at photo 3 and photo 4, you'll see kind of the neighbors to the west and to the left side of that photo. Yeah.
It's most clearly on the site plan where we showed the neighboring houses and their decks in relation to what we're doing.
I think what we're left with is with a question. And again, I'm just gonna pound case law tonight. And it's State versus Kenosha, and 218 with second 396 at 413 to 414 from 1988, if you're really interested. Is decks and other accessory structures not essential to reasonable use, are not eligible for variances. That doesn't mean that decks and accessory structures are not necessarily qualify for variances, but the question becomes, is the deck essential for reasonable use of the property?
In this case, I believe essential, you have a lake home, to have a deck and the views that overlook the lake, that's the part that you're taking advantage of. That's why you pay the taxes, that's why you pay the price to live there, and to not be able to use it when all the neighbors can, either because they were set with different setbacks when their house was constructed, or because they did something without getting permission or going to code and it just let fly. They're kind of stuck in the middle of trying to see what a compromise the city can make to make it so they don't have to tear their whole house down to get just, I mean, they're only talking about adding 8 feet. They're not adding a huge addition to this house. They're only adding 8 feet to the end of the house, and then just asking for the same, a usable deck on the back side of that to be square and not cut to that meander line, which is really it seems like an abstract line that you can kind of resurvey and readjust. It doesn't have anything to do with the ordinary high water mark on the back. It's just a measurement from the front. And they're well above water. I mean, and as it's a concern right now, they're way up there. Building that far back doesn't put them in any flood situation or compromise their neighbors in any way for flood situation, and definitely doesn't compromise the neighbors for line of sight because they're already out there too.
No, I may ask a question that's going to be another strange one, but that's my Brad's pounded case law. I'm coming up with weird questions. So my weird question has to do with, is there a hardship when you do have a lakeshore property and your neighbors are encroaching beyond the appropriate setback, although it may have been approved at some time, we don't know when. But being able to build and be able to take advantage of reasonable sight lines. Like, it's almost the reverse of, like, normally we're saying you can't build this thing here because you're gonna block your neighbor's sight line. And that's one of the reasons why we're like, okay, you can't do that. This is the reverse scenario of the deck that's on the west side is clearly encroaching beyond where they should be. And can that be one of the considerations of the hardship aspect of a lakeshore property, being able to adequately use it, to be able to have adequate views from your property? Because we use the same argument in, you can't do this because you're taking away someone's view. That almost, to me, then says, well, you do then have a right to some view.
I love your weird question.
I mean, also to note that it is
money here.
The yard is 50 feet wide, which is to today's standards, Monona wouldn't make a lot that's 50 feet wide. A lot has to be at least 78 feet. Doug would know the number. So they're dealing with a lot that's way narrower than what today's standards are. They only can go forward or back. And then when the house is twisted on that lot to compound that, I mean, they go all 4 feet. and they shoot over 4 feet, they're encroaching on lot lines no matter what they do and go out with, because the how the house is placed and because of the readjustment of meander line versus high water, ordinary high water line. It's challenging. These 50-foot wide lots, 300 feet deep, 50 feet wide. It's challenging. And they're trying to not tear down a perfectly good house, just add on a little bit, 8 feet in a deck that doesn't encroach upon what the neighbors have already done at some point, and keep all their trees. For me, this is a good one. I've done a lot of different lake homes. We've been approved before for shore yard setbacks just by connecting the points of the houses, you know, in the backyards and saying, okay, you can't go beyond that point. In Monona, just a block away. And on Taniwatha and on Winnequa, we've done 2 of them that we just use the neighboring houses points to just not encroach on that, and to know that their neighbors are all in approval of this. They don't care. They're all for it. It doesn't affect their views, and it's not in danger of flooding because it's so high. It doesn't get closer than, I mean, it's pretty far back. I'm just speaking in regards to the hardship as far as lot placement, lot size, and really irregular rear yard setback that's a meander line. The other hardships regarding the usability of the house and all that are also equal, but I don't know what their relevant, you know, how that relates to hardship. Hardship is a hard one.
Hardship is the one we usually get stuck on.
Yes, I see, you know, that's where you guys bounce back and forth a lot, and it's a lot of how you guys interpret it. And we understand that, and that's why there's been so much thought in this design. How can we get around not doing a variance, you know, to make this just as easy as possible? And it was really hard. We've had 2 stories on it. We've had a regular shaped deck. We've tried a bunch of different things that just don't really work and aren't, you know, doing the right thing. You don't want a really irregular house that changes angles, and then you get into people that want to change that at a later date, like the very first variance that was on there for an hour tonight with all the irregular stairs and the weird stuff that they had to do, that maybe they did that because they had to comply with certain setbacks and whatnot. You know, I don't know the history of that, but this one's, to me, seems pretty straightforward. They're not asking for a whole lot, and everyone's in agreement, and it's going to look nice and easy.
Well, and I think that you know, having neighbors be in agreement is only one factor, but
yeah,
you know, a simple lack of objections from neighbors doesn't, in and of itself, doesn't provide a grant of the basis for granting a variance. It's just one thing that we usually look for. I'm actually shocked how many times we actually don't get more objections from neighbors, and how we get a lot of letters in support sometimes for some things. But there's actually a case for that too. That's Arneford versus Sauk County Board of Adjustments, 162 West 2D.
I created a monster.
46 from 1991.
You must be bored tonight. Doug, hang on, Doug had something important to say.
Yeah, so just to your question about does the reverse create, I would say that would be a dangerous or a slippery slope in terms of just, I think one of the, at least from my perspective, the burden for the variance is to be difficult, because otherwise we should be changing the ordinance.
Yes.
I think that we continue to do it, and just because one did it doesn't necessarily mean, and I think we would continue a race to the lake shore.
Yeah.
Would be the high level there. I'm not suggesting that's the case here, but I think the question, as I heard it, was sort of, because the neighbor has it, does that mean there's an expectation that they have to view? I think that could be considered as part of this, maybe as the hardship, or maybe as, you know, a portion of the matrix, but I don't think on its own that defines it, that allows it, but the board could consider that potentially, you know, as an element. I think what I would say would be for the hardship, the would be the conformity, rendering conformity with such restrictions being unnecessarily burdensome. You know, I think that may be, when I think of this, and some of these, they often bleed together, but I think of the lot characteristics, the challenges, and sort of what is being requested, and the angles that are present here, the extent of the request. That may be, if the question was of me of which part of the hardship might be considered, that to me would be the section I would sort of highlight.
All right. Ryan, after hearing that, hang on.
I did hear the comment on taking pains to preserve some the old oak trees. And I do think that plays into this a little bit, because I think those kind of considerations and those kind of aesthetic considerations are in line with the purpose of the zoning restrictions, and that squarely falls into unnecessary hardship factor. There's also a case on the point about changing the zoning statutes that Doug just mentioned, but I won't get into that either.
Which we may want to do someday, and get rid of the meander line and use ordinary high water mark. It would make Doug's job much better. It would be like overwhelmingly supported by probably every contractor on the planet.
And every single lakefront property owner, probably.
Yes, I'm sure. Ryan, after hearing what Doug just said.
I just wanted to add, I think Doug mentioned, the race to the lake shore, right? And we were asked to consider cumulative effect, right? I think this kind of modest addition has the opposite effect, right? If we are considering this addition and the great lengths they've gone to preserve, for instance, the trees, right? The look and feel of the neighborhood. I think we're actually encouraging. We're not encouraging the race to the shoreline by approving this.
Encouraging a more modest approach.
Yeah, something a little bit more reasonable.
And I hope I didn't say that in my.
No, that's not what I heard.
Okay.
Hearing all that, is anybody willing to make a motion regarding this item?
I'll make a motion to approve. And for the hardship, can we use Jeremy and Doug's comments? Because they laid it out pretty.
Doug, I saw Doug taking great notes, and I think that included a variety of things, including narrow lot lines, a skew of the structure itself, the position in relation to the meander line seeming to be in alignment with the street when the street was built, and the ordinary high water mark being a different alignment, and the trees was all part of the hardship. Did anything we missed that?
I don't know if you want to comment the steps. I mean, there just isn't room for the step, or I mean, anywhere else to put the steps.
It's replacement of existing steps in a less encroachment and preserving the old oak beneath the steps and allowing no disturbance to take place. The depth of the steps, I know I'm adding to your motion, but these are all the pieces I heard. And so you can just tell me if it's what you're, but if the steps extending into the shore yard can be reduced by additional pavers and grading, that they would not exceed what is in the drawing of the additional steps.
Yeah.
I think that's all what I heard, but I know we said a lot of things.
I mean, I think being the steps is a hardship. They're not safe, or that's what the impression I'm getting.
It's like you've been over it. That's how they feel
I mean,
right
the
now.
steps are a retaining wall, but I'm not even gonna go there. I mean, part of it is I don't think they need variance for it because it's really a retaining wall that they're just using to get down from the deck.
Yeah, the steps sort of, as I would determine them, would be wooden steps coming off of the landing off of the deck with handrail and things. If that is not the case, then, or at least for a portion, you know, I think that would be omitted from the need for this variance. Yeah. The only other thing, if I could ask, would be, if there was a consideration for the adjacent neighbors. If that is important as part of the motion.
Of their deck structures.
Where they're,
The
I
relative position.
kind of hesitate to go there. I don't wanna
Race to the shoreline.
establish, well, or establish something that the zoning board did on. Property.
All right, so we have a long motion that. Anybody willing to second?
It's kind of meandering.
I'll second the motion.
All right, any further discussions, questions, concerns? All right,
I think to the point of, I guess I'm gonna summarize it as the creep issue. I think there are some, I'm on it today, a number of cases on point that say sequential variances should be denied because when the initial variance was requested, the board must have determined that the property with the variance had reasonable use.
interesting,
Oh,
yeah,
that's-
yeah, makes some sense.
Mhm.
All right,
That's my last 2 cents on this.
yeah, no, I like that one, that's a. Interesting piece that. All those in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
I
Opposed? All right, motion is passed.
Thank
So
you.
much.
You guys
Thank you.
really are a thoughtful, knowledgeable group. This is really impressive to just sit in on, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. A lot of your time. They pay us so much. No. All right, we can move on to item 13. Next meeting is canceled. Canceled, all right.
No, I'm not yet.
Oh, all right, perfect. So everybody gets August off. And it looks like September would be the next meeting.
And I received an application today, already separate applications, so if you could please mark September 19th, I would appreciate that on the calendars.
We might have the, second
We may
application.
have the ADU potentially as well.
September 19th.
Yes, that's the regular third Thursday date.
So give Brad more time to look up case laws.
Yeah.
I can summarize it and send you guys a brief.
No, thank you. No. No more reading, no more reading.
Don't
Any,
forget your tables.
You need you need a table of contents? All right.
yes. And I'm gonna combine any updates, discussion on DEIB efforts as well as sustainability efforts. And any questions that you have for Doug or concerns. I'm lumping them all together.
I would just bring to the attention of the zoning board, the DEIB implementation plan that just recently went to council. There quite a lot of elements in there, a lot of discussion about housing, sort of and planning elements, so. Please take a look, it's been a while since we met, so I just want to bring that to the attention. That's part of the council packets, I believe, the last two meetings, it's in that, yeah.
I would add in the piece of the conversation regarding not only in the DEIB implementation plan, but also in our previous housing component in our comp plan, and likely even more in our future housing comp plan. Will probably be more discussions regarding ADUs. And at some point, we're probably not this group, but at some point, the city's gonna have to wrestle with the issue of like. How can we put some parameters around where appropriate use for ADUs are? What does it look like? Can it exceed the 1,000 square feet? What happens if a structure already is in a non-compliance located, like all the things we're wrestling with tonight, I think. Is gonna have to happen at some point. Because we can't have a housing element and all these things that push one thing as it relates to housing. if everything this ends up coming back to this group, because Brad, to your point, if there are multiple variances given, that means you should be looking at changing your ordinance, because why do you keep breaking your own ordinance? I would add in, how do we go about exploring if the city wants to change the ordinance section regarding the meander line versus ordinary high water? And what path does that go? Does that happen through plan commission? Where does it start?
It would start with me, and it would be the planning commission would look at that as an ordinance change that would then go to council.
Okay.
Because planning commission would oversee chapter 480 zoning section, and that would go then to council. I would only say I certainly appreciate the frustrations, and I know my predecessor was also looking into this. The difficulty I will forewarn is picking the number from the OHWM. That it varies across the city, so if we picked a number, it's either gonna be great for new building or put people into non-compliance, so that's the hesitation and the challenge with that, but absolutely.
Is it any better with the meander line though?
It's at least the existing condition, I guess, so from
Well,
a.
maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, not for a lot of properties.
Yeah, I would say definitely tonight, this application, this survey, so we also don't have a map of the meander lines, and each one has to be based on the surveys that we receive. It's not something that we can map, like a floodplain map or something like that, so that makes it challenging, because otherwise it could become a mapping exercise where we just look at that and we take the average or something like that, so it's not something we can put into our online map or our
The GSI layer.
GIS maps, yeah.
Yeah, that one.
It's not something we can do there, but this is another example to potentially say it varies, at least let's even just say that it's not uniform across the city. Whereas high water mark would be a lot more predictable.
Yeah,
DNR has already determined that ordinary high water mark.
Yes,
in
yeah.
the City.
yeah, it sounds like the meander line was done by a plat, which was probably more about the roads than anything.
Maybe more about the condition of the shoreline at the time.
Okay.
Because some of these, I think they are 100 years old, some of them, you know, the ones, so. Yeah, I think that may be more to the point, but normally they do follow the shoreline, at least more parallel to the shoreline. This one was quite unique.
Yeah. Can we request that they get added to a planning commission, at least for a discussion, not necessarily an action, but to let them know, like, hey, this group is really struggling with having to reason through those. And it's really hard when it comes to the hardship issue, when it doesn't seem like it should be a hardship issue.
Yeah.
And I know it might not happen overnight, but at least maybe it will get on their radar.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Brad or Ryan, anything for Doug or anything on sustainability, DEIB, or about upcoming meetings?
Nope.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Enjoy your evening. I know it was a little bit longer of a meeting, but they're always challenging. So thank you again for all your work.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Perfect. A second.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Awesome.